When the HOA tried to take away his beloved boat, he didn't just fight back. He took control of the entire marina they all depended on, turning a quiet neighborhood battle into a fight for respect, justice, and community. Jason Turner had always dreamed of living by the water. Ever since he was a young boy, he loved the sound of waves and the smell of fresh lake air. His father used to take him fishing early in the morning, and they would sit in silence listening to the birds while the sun rose over the calm water. Those memories stayed with him through his adult life, through college, through the long years of working as a marine engineer, and even during the lonely days after his wife passed away. Water made him feel calm, alive, connected to everything he loved. After retiring at the age of 52, Jason finally made that dream come true. He bought a small but beautiful house in a quiet, gated lakeside community called River's Edge. The neighborhood was clean, peaceful, and well-maintained. Most people living there were retirees like him, looking for a quiet life near nature. What Jason liked most about River's Edge was the community marina. It was right behind his backyard. A short walk through a narrow path led straight to the dock. That marina was what sealed the deal when he first saw the property. He imagined himself spending long mornings on a boat, reading, sailing, or just staring at the rippling water. As soon as he moved in, Jason brought in his prized possession, a classic, restored wooden boat named Liberty. The boat had been in his family for years. His grandfather had built it with his own hands. Jason had spent years carefully restoring it, polishing the wood, and repairing its engine. Liberty wasn't just a boat. It was part of his family history. He'd taken care of it like a child. Now, finally, it was time to enjoy it. He registered it properly with the HOA, followed all the rules, and tied it gently at Dock B, the spot closest to his home. For a few months, life was peaceful and exactly how he had imagined it. He would wake up early, walk barefoot to the marina with a cup of coffee, and sit on Liberty for hours. Sometimes he'd take her out on the lake. Sometimes he just stayed docked and watched the sunrise. Other residents waved to him as they passed by, and a few even came down to chat. Jason wasn't the most talkative person, but he enjoyed friendly faces. One couple, the Rileys, invited him to dinner after they saw him painting the boat. Another neighbor complimented him on how beautiful Liberty looked. Yeah, everything seemed perfect. Then one day he found a white envelope stuck to his front door. The letter inside was from the River's Edge Homeowners Association, commonly known as the HOA. At first, Jason thought it was a reminder to attend a community barbecue or something casual. But as he read the letter, his smile faded. The letter was cold, direct, and filled with legal-sounding words. It said his boat violated the visual harmony of the marina and was not in compliance with newly updated HOA guidelines. The letter ordered him to remove the boat within 14 days or face daily fines of $100. Jason read the letter again, thinking there had to be a mistake. Liberty wasn't junk. It was clean, well-maintained, and registered. He had read the community guidelines before moving in. There was nothing that said boats like his weren't allowed. Confused and a little hurt, he decided to call the HOA office. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. She told him the board had voted on a new rule regarding marina aesthetics, and that Liberty's appearance did not align with the new standards. Jason asked what those standards were, and the woman hesitated. She said the rules were still being finalized, but that he would need to comply or risk further action. Jason was stunned. He had just settled into his dream life, and now he was being told to get rid of something so important to him based on a vague, unconfirmed rule. Determined to get answers, Jason decided to attend the next HOA board meeting. It was held in a small community center near the front gate of the neighborhood. When he arrived, about a dozen people were already seated, and the 5 board members were at the front table. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper, and the mood was tense. Jason waited until the public comment section, then stood up and politely explained his situation. He showed pictures of Liberty, shared the boat's history, and asked why his boat was being singled out. The response was cold. The board president, Linda Kerr, was a sharp-tongued woman in her late 60s with silver hair and a tight smile. She told Jason that while his boat might have sentimental value, it disrupted the uniform appearance they were trying to maintain. She claimed several complaints had been filed, though she wouldn't say by whom. When Jason asked why other boats, some even bigger or older, were allowed to remain, Linda avoided the question. She simply repeated that the board had the right to enforce standards and that their decision was final. Jason left the meeting feeling disrespected and helpless. It wasn't just about the boat, it was about being treated unfairly. It followed every rule, paid his dues on time, and been nothing but respectful. Why was he being targeted? The more he thought about it, the more he felt something deeper was going on. Maybe someone on the board didn't like him. Maybe there was favoritism. Maybe the rule wasn't about boats at all, but about control. He started talking to his neighbors. Quietly, without making a scene, he asked around. What he found out shocked him. Several residents had boats that looked older, larger, or less maintained than Liberty, yet none of them had received violation letters. In fact, many of them had never even heard of the new visual harmony policy. Jason wrote everything down: names, boat types, and dates. He also began looking into public records and HOA documents. If they were going to come after his boat, he wanted to know if they had the right to. One evening, while flipping through the original deed to his property, he noticed something strange. There was a section about easement rights and land use. The language was old, a bit confusing, but something about it caught his attention. It mentioned a small strip of land connected to the Marina entrance land that had once belonged to his grandfather. Jason's heart started to race. Could it be that he still had some legal right to part of the marina? He went to the county office the next day and asked for historical maps and property documents. The clerk helped him pull up land ownership records, and what he saw made him sit down. That narrow strip of land, barely 30 feet wide but running right through the entrance to the marina, had never been properly transferred to the HOA. It was technically still tied to Jason's property through a loophole in the original deed, part of a land trust his grandfather had created decades ago. It was a detail so small that no one had noticed it in years. Jason didn't say a word to anyone, not yet. He needed to be sure. He hired a real estate attorney to review everything. After a week of back and forth, the lawyer confirmed it. Jason had full legal ownership of the land that served as the only vehicle access to the marina. That meant delivery trucks, boat trailers, emergency vehicles, and even golf carts, all of them used that strip. And now it legally belonged to Jason. He stood on that land one evening, watching the sun go down. Boats rocked gently in the water. Birds called from the trees. There was Liberty, quiet and beautiful in the orange light. He didn't want revenge. But he wasn't going to be pushed around anymore either. The HOA had tried to take away the one thing he loved most. Now, without even realizing it, they had handed him the key to everything they depended on. Jason didn't tell anyone what he had discovered. He didn't write angry letters or shout at board meetings. He simply smiled to himself, walked home, and started making quiet plans that would soon change everything in River's Edge. The peace in River's Edge didn't last long after that letter. Jason had tried to live quietly, minding his own business, but now he felt like he was being watched. Every time he walked down to the marina, he noticed someone on their porch. Looking, when he worked on Liberty, he felt eyes on him. There were whispers when he passed by the community center or the mailbox area. He wasn't sure if it was real or just in his head, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The HOA, led by Linda Kerr, was not slowing down. A few days after the first warning letter, Jason got another. This one was even more aggressive. It stated that he had 7 days left to remove Liberty or fines would begin. $100 a day. That meant $700 in a week, and it would only go up from there. Jason looked at the letter and shook his head. There were still no clear reasons. There's no official description of what visual harmony meant. There's no exact rule that Liberty had broken. Just cold words and threats. He tried calling again, but the woman in the office simply said, "The board has made its decision." When Jason asked why boats larger and older than his were still docked, she replied, "That's a separate issue." Didn't make sense. His boat was clean, well kept, and had been approved when he first registered it. What was the real? Reason behind all of this? Jason went back to the marina the next day and looked around. Ducka had a speedboat with peeling paint and broken seats. Duxie had an old fishing boat that hadn't moved in months. Nobody had complained about those. Only his boat seemed to be the problem. He took pictures, careful to document the condition. Of each boat, he talked to the owners too. Most of them were friendly and surprised. One man named Greg laughed and said, "They're coming after Liberty. That thing looks better than half the boats here." But there were some neighbors who didn't smile back. Some looked away when Jason passed them. Others, like Mrs. Howard, who lived 2 houses down, had always been polite but now avoided him completely. He began to understand that not everyone liked having Liberty at the dock. Maybe it wasn't the boat. What? Maybe it was about control, jealousy, or something deeper. Jason had moved into River's Edge, thinking it was a peaceful retirement community. But it was starting to feel like a place where power played quietly, under smiles and rules. The worst part was how lonely it felt. Jason had no family left in town. His daughter lived states away, and his few close friends were all still working. He tried to keep busy, walking in the mornings and working on small boat repairs in the afternoons. But every time he looked at Liberty, tied quietly to the dock, a strange feeling came over him. It was like watching a friend being bullied and not being able to help. On the 6th day, he received a new notice, this one posted directly on the boat itself. A bright orange paper flapping in the wind. It read, "Final warning. Violation of community guidelines. Removal required immediately." Jason felt anger rise in his chest. They were treating him like a criminal, like someone who didn't belong. He pulled the notice off and crumpled it in his hand. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Linda Kerr, the HOA. President, she had been polite when he moved in. She even brought him cookies once. But now, she was leading the charge against him. Why? Jason remembered seeing her on the marina once, months ago. She had been talking to a man with a clipboard, pointing at boats. Maybe that was when the plan started. Maybe Liberty had stood out too much. Maybe she just didn't like him. Jason decided to go to the next HOA board meeting again. This time. He didn't plan to plead. He just wanted to ask one question. Why him? The meeting was held on a rainy Tuesday evening. Jason arrived early and took a seat near the back. The room slowly filled with residents. Some nodded at him. Others avoided eye contact. The 5 board members took their seats at the front table, and Linda Kerr adjusted her glasses before tapping the microphone. After they finished talking about lawn, care schedules, and fence height rules, they opened the floor for resident concerns. Jason stood up. "My name is Jason Turner," he said. "I live at 112 Maple Cove. I have a question for the board." Linda looked up slowly. "Yes, Mr. Turner. Go ahead. I'd like to know why my boat is being targeted." "I've reviewed the guidelines. I've followed every rule. I've registered Liberty, paid my dues, and maintained the boat. Yet I've been told to remove it while other boats in worse condition remain." There was silence in the room. A few people shifted in their seats. One man coughed. Linda smiled tightly. "Mr. Turner, the board voted to update marina guidelines to preserve the community's visual standards. Your boat, while clearly well-maintained, does not fit the aesthetic we're aiming for. Several residents have expressed concerns." Jason replied calmly. "Can you show me those concerns? Can you show me the rule that says wooden boats aren't?" Aloud, Linda glanced at the papers in front of her. "We don't have to show individual complaints. And the rule doesn't mention wooden boats directly. It refers to consistency and visual harmony. Your boat, unfortunately, does not meet that standard." Jason nodded slowly. "So the rule is based on opinions, not specifics?" Linda frowned. "Mr. Turner, we appreciate your concern, but the board has final authority on these matters." Jason sat down without another word. The meeting moved on, but the room felt heavier. Some residents looked uncomfortable. Others whispered quietly. Jason didn't care. He had said what he needed to say. It was clear now. They didn't have a real reason. They just didn't want Liberty there. They were using vague words to force him out. Back at home, Jason took out the file from his lawyer and spread the documents on the dining table. The strip of land, the narrow piece that served as the only road to the marina, was his. He double-checked everything. Maps, ownership records, old community plans, all confirmed the same thing. That road had been part of his grandfather's land trust. When Jason inherited the house, he also inherited that little strip no one had noticed because it had been used freely for years. But legally, it had never been transferred to the HOA. That meant he had the power to restrict access if he wanted to. Jason stared at the maps for a long time. Didn't want to use it as a weapon, but they had left him no choice. Wasn't going to let them take liberty away without a fight. He filed for a fence permit quietly. The process took a couple of weeks, and during that time, the HOA continued to send notices. Fines started appearing in his mailbox, $100, then $200, then $500. They were trying to squeeze him out with pressure. Jason didn't react. He didn't respond to their letters. He just kept working on liberty, humming softly as he polished the wood and tightened the bolts. One morning, 2 HOA board members knocked on his door. He stood on the porch with clipboards and serious faces. "Mr. Turner, we're here to discuss the violation and the accumulating fines," said the taller one. Jason invited them in politely. He offered coffee. They refused. He handed them a copy of the land deed and the permit application. "You see this land here?" Jason pointed at the map, that road leading to the marina. "It's mine. Always has been. The records missed it. But the county office didn't." The 2 board members looked at the papers, stunned. Jason could see the confusion on their faces. One of them asked, "Why are you showing us this?" Jason smiled gently. "Because if I'm being forced to remove my boat, I think it's only fair to take a closer look at how everyone accesses that marina. Don't you agree?" They left without saying much. A few hours later, Jason saw Linda Kerr standing near the marina entrance with a phone in her hand. She looked directly at his house for a long time before walking away. Jason didn't feel like a hero. He wasn't trying to start a war. But he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to be bullied. Not by a committee, not by unclear rules. And definitely not by people who thought power gave them the right to push others around. The fence would be going up soon. And when it did, the board would finally understand that not everything in River's Edge could be controlled by paper. And meetings. Some things were built on history, on family, and on quiet strength. Jason stood in his backyard and looked out over the lake. The sky was blue, the wind was soft, and Liberty rocked gently at the dock, still proud and still beautiful. He whispered to her, "They picked the wrong man to mess with." Jason Turner woke up before sunrise, as usual. The morning air was cool and quiet, and the sky outside his window was still a soft gray. Birds had just started singing. The lake was completely still, like a giant mirror, and the reflection of the marina lights shimmered gently on the surface. Jason looked out from his back porch with a quiet smile. He sipped his coffee and stared at the path that led from his backyard to the marina entrance. The same path now belonged to him legally, and officially just 2 days ago, the fencing materials had arrived. Long wooden panels, metal poles, and a roll of chain-link mesh stood piled near the edge of the path. Jason had hired a small local crew to help with the work. They weren't from the community, so they didn't care much about HOA drama. To them, it was just another job. They arrived around 9 a.m. and began measuring the land, placing stakes, and marking the boundaries. Jason stood nearby, arms crossed, watching closely. It didn't take long for the news to spread. By 10 a.m., 3 residents had walked over, curious and concerned. "What's going on here?" asked a woman in a pink tracksuit, holding a leash. With a tiny dog, Jason smiled politely and told her, "I'm putting up a fence. This land belongs to me." Her eyes widened. She looked confused, maybe a little annoyed. "You can't block the marina," she said. Jason calmly replied, "Actually, I can." That afternoon, Linda Kerr showed up. She arrived like a queen marching into battle. Wearing a navy blazer and holding a thick folder, Jason was standing by the workers when he noticed her coming up the path, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She stopped 2 feet from him and said, "This is ridiculous, Jason." Jason looked her in the eyes. "You left me no choice, Linda." She opened the folder and started talking fast. Something about community rights, about public access, about neighborhood trust. Jason let her finish. Then he pulled a folded paper from his back pocket and handed it to her. It was a copy of the land deed and the recent permit approved by the county. "I'm not doing anything illegal," Jason said. "This land has belonged to my family for over 50 years. Nobody noticed because nobody cared. But now that you've tried to take my boat, I've started to care." Linda's mouth opened slightly. She had clearly not expected this. "You're punishing the entire neighborhood for a misunderstanding?" she said. Jason laughed. "Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable." "A misunderstanding? You've been sending me threats for weeks. Called my boat ugly? Fine. Me embarrassed me at board meetings." "This isn't a misunderstanding, it's bullying. You're making a mistake," Linda said sharply. "The marina is shared property. Do you really want to cause chaos?" Jason's face was calm. "I didn't start the chaos." She stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. But Jason could tell this wasn't over. Over the next few days, the fence started taking shape. It wasn't fancy, just a simple, clean design with a gate at the end of the path. Jason added a lock with a keypad. Only he had the code. On the side of the fence, he placed a small sign, "Private property, no public access without permission." It was like a bomb had gone off in River's Edge. Word spread quickly. Residents began gathering near the fence, pointing and talking in hushed voices. People stood on their porches staring. Cars slowed down to look. Some neighbors knocked on Jason's door, asking questions. A few were polite, others were angry. "Jason, this isn't fair. Now we can't drive our trailers to the marina. My grandkids won't be able to launch their kayaks. I've lived here for 10 years. I've used that path every summer." Jason listened carefully to each person. He wasn't rude. He simply explained the truth, that the HOA had forced his hand. He had tried to handle things peacefully. He had asked for explanations. But when they treated him unfairly, he decided to protect what was his. Some people understood. Others didn't. One man, Mr. Riley, the same man who once invited Jason to dinner, stood silently at the edge of the fence one evening, looking sad. When Jason approached, Mr. Riley said quietly, "I wish it didn't come to this." "Me too," Jason replied. Meanwhile, the HOA went into full panic mode. They sent emails to all residents warning that the fence was a threat to community cooperation and promising legal action. They tried to claim that Jason's land didn't include the access road, but Jason's lawyer was ready. Every time they sent a letter, Jason responded with documents. Every threat was met with calm, cold facts. They couldn't touch him. The real problem was deeper than just property lines. The HOA had built their power on the belief that people wouldn't fight back. They controlled the neighborhood through fear, through endless rules and hidden votes. But Jason had shown them that sometimes people did push back. And when they did, it could shake the whole system. Soon, boats in the marina were stuck. Trailers couldn't drive in to pull them out. A delivery truck for maintenance supplies had to turn around. One resident tried to carry a heavy motor part through the walking path, but gave up halfway. The HOA scheduled a meeting to address the crisis. They begged Jason to attend. He declined. Instead, he sent a letter. It was short, polite, and direct. He wrote, "I will be happy to reopen access to the marina entrance when the HOA reverses the unfair ruling against my boat, clears all fines from my account, and provides a written apology for the treatment I received." The letter hit them like a wave. Some board members wanted to negotiate. Others refused to back down. The community was now split into two sides: Team Jason and Team HOA. Residents argued during morning walks. Neighbors stopped waving to each. Some even started attending board meetings just to shout at Linda Kerr. But Jason stayed calm. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat, just waited. He kept fixing up Liberty. He cleaned the dock. He helped a few older neighbors carry groceries. He lived his life. The fence remained locked. A week later, a small article appeared in the local newspaper, "Retired engineer fences off marina in HOA dispute." A reporter had heard about the story from a friend who lived nearby. They interviewed Jason in his backyard. He told the truth about the boat, the threats, and the fence. The reporter even took a photo of Jason standing next to Liberty, with the locked gate in the background. The story went viral in the area. People from other neighborhoods started commenting online. Some supported Jason, calling him a hero for standing up to HOA bullying. Others criticized him, saying he was being selfish. Yeah, but the attention put pressure on the HOA. Now their actions were public. They couldn't hide behind secret rules. Soon, after the article, something surprising happened. One morning, Jason found a handwritten letter in his mailbox. No stamp, just tucked gently inside. He opened it and read, "Dear Mr. Turner, I'm sorry. I voted against you without knowing the full story. I trusted what I was told. But after reading the article and speaking to other residents, I realized the board handled things poorly. Your boat is beautiful, and you deserve to keep it. I've asked the board to reconsider their decision. Sincerely, Margaret, Lot 17, Jason." Sat down on his porch, holding the letter. It wasn't just about liberty anymore. It was about respect. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're alone. A few days later, a second letter came, then a third. Small apologies. Small. Signs of support. A man offered to bring groceries. A woman baked a pie and left it at his door. Slowly, quietly, the neighborhood started changing. Jason knew this wasn't over yet. The HOA was still fighting. Linda Kerr was still refusing to back down. But something had shifted. People had started thinking for themselves. The fence wasn't just wood and metal anymore. It had become a symbol of resistance, of justice, and of one man's quiet strength. And as Jason walked down to the marina one evening, the wind blowing gently through the trees and Liberty waiting patiently at the dock, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Even if the battle wasn't done, he'd already won something greater. Jason Turner was fixing a loose screw on his boat when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around to see a young boy standing near the gate. The boy was maybe 10 years old, wearing a life jacket 2 sizes too big and holding a small fishing rod. He looked nervous. Excuse me, sir?" the boy said softly. "My dad says I can't go fishing anymore because the gate is locked. I always used to fish from the dock with my grandpa. We do it every weekend." Jason felt a knot in his chest. He put down his screwdriver and walked over. "What's your name?" Cody, the boy said. "Well, Cody," Jason replied kindly, "I'm really sorry about the gate. It's not your fault. It's just a big disagreement with the neighborhood board." Cody nodded slowly, clearly not understanding everything, but enough to know something was wrong. Jason paused, thinking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small laminated card. "Here," he said, handing it to the boy. "This is a guest code just for you and your grandpa. You can come through any time, but don't tell anyone." "All right," Cody's face lit up. He grinned and said, "Thank you, sir," before running off waving the card in the air. Shh. Jason smiled too. It felt good to do something kind in the middle of so much conflict, but the moment of peace didn't last long. That same afternoon, Jason received an official-looking envelope from the HOA. Inside was a formal letter, this time with a new tone. No more threats, no more fines. It read, "Mr. Turner, after reviewing recent developments and discussing feedback from community members, the board wishes to schedule a meeting to resolve the ongoing marina access situation. We believe a peaceful and fair solution can be reached. Sincerely, Linda Kerr, President, River's Edge HOH." Jason leaned back in his chair and read the letter again. He didn't trust Linda, but something had clearly changed. The pressure from residents, the article in the newspaper, and maybe even the quiet support he'd started receiving it, was all starting to add up. Still, he wasn't going to walk into a trap. He called his lawyer and asked her to attend the meeting with him. He also printed out every legal document he had: land deeds, access permits, photos of his boat, emails from the HOA, and a timeline of every event. If they wanted to meet, he would be ready. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Evening at the community center, Jason arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a clean shirt and holding a thick binder. His lawyer, Rebecca, walked beside him, calm and confident. When they entered, about 30 people were already seated in folding chairs. At the front, Linda Kerr sat with the other board members. People turned and whispered as Jason walked in. Some nodded politely, as others avoided his eyes. Linda stood and spoke into the microphone. "We're here to discuss the Marina issue and try to find a way forward." Her voice was smoother now, controlled. She had practiced this speech. Jason waited until she was done, then walked to the front. He didn't use a microphone. He just stood there and spoke clearly. "Good evening," he began. "Many of you know me. Some of you don't. I've lived here for nearly 7 years. I've paid every fee, followed every rule, and never caused a problem. Until recently." Held up a photo of Liberty. "This is my boat. It's not flashy, not new, but it means something to me. It belonged to my father. I restored it myself. When the HOA decided it didn't match the aesthetic and ordered me to remove it, I tried to reason with them. They refused." He pointed toward the gate in the photo. "So I did what any man would do. I defended my property. I didn't break the law. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply took back what already belonged to me." There was silence in the room. Jason continued, "I didn't do this to hurt anyone. I know some of you are angry. I know you've been inconvenienced. But I ask you this. If someone tried to take something you loved, something you built with your hands, would you just let it happen?" A few people nodded slowly. Others looked down, thinking. Jason opened his binder and handed copies of the land deed to the board. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to offer a deal. Take back the decision. Let my boat stay. Clear the fines. Apologize. In return, I'll remove the gate and restore access." Linda stared at him. The board whispered among themselves. Then, something unexpected happened. Margaret from Lot 17, the woman who had written him the apology letter, stood up in the crowd. "I vote we accept his offer," she said loudly. "This has gone too far. We're punishing the wrong person." Several others murmured in agreement. One man clapped. Linda's face tightened. She didn't like losing control, but she couldn't ignore the shift in the room. People were turning against her. The board members looked uncomfortable. Finally, Linda sighed and said, "We'll take a vote." Jason waited. Hands went up one by one. Out of the 5 board members, 4 raised their hands in favor of the deal. Linda was the only one who didn't. It was done. The next day, Jason received a signed letter from the HOA officially, reversing their decision. The fines were cleared. The complaint about the boat was withdrawn, and at the bottom of the letter was a simple sentence: "We apologize for any distress caused." Jason walked down to the fence and unlocked the gate. He opened it wide. Marina Path was once again free to use. Neighbors began visiting him, some to say sorry, others to shake his hand. Mr. Riley brought a bottle of wine. A young couple offered to help paint his deck. Even the boy, Cody, came running down the path with a big smile, dragging his fishing rod behind him. But not everyone was happy. Linda Kerr resigned from her position as HOA president a week later. She moved out shortly after, claiming she needed a fresh start. No one seemed too upset about it. Her replacement was a retired teacher named Sharon, who believed in fairness and transparency. She visited Jason personally and thanked him for standing up for himself. Life slowly returned to normal. Jason spent his mornings by the lake, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. He took Liberty out on the water often, waving to neighbors from the dock. The community felt different now, less tense, more open. One Saturday, the neighborhood threw a potluck picnic by the marina. Jason was invited to speak. He kept it short. "Didn't want to be a troublemaker," he said. "I just wanted to be treated fairly. I'm glad we can all enjoy this place together again." People clapped. Some even cheered. Later, as the sun began to set, Jason stood at the edge of the water, looking out at Liberty bobbing gently in her spot. The sky was painted with shades of gold and orange, and a warm breeze blew through the trees. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had just stood up, when standing down would have been easier. He'd done it for himself. but also for something bigger, the right to be heard, to be respected, and to live in peace. And that night, for the first time in a long time, he slept without worry. After the long struggle, things began to change around the marina and the neighborhood. Jason Turner woke up each morning with a sense of calm he hadn't felt in months. The fight had ended, but the story wasn't just about victory or defeat. It was about what came next, how people healed, and how a community could come back together after being torn apart. Jason looked out from his porch at the marina. The water was sparkling in the early sun, and boats gently rocked on the waves. The fence he had built was gone now, replaced by a simple wooden gate with a friendly sign that read, "Welcome, please respect our community." It was open, inviting, but also a reminder that respect was important. The day after the fence came down, people began coming back to the marina. Families who had been angry and distant started to smile again. Children ran along the docks, their laughter echoing in the air. Jason's boat, Liberty, was clean and shiny, ready to take him out on the lake whenever he wanted. For the first time in weeks, he felt that the place really belonged to everyone again. Neighbors came to visit Jason's house more often. Some brought gifts like fresh vegetables from their gardens or homemade cookies. Mr. Riley, the man who had been quiet during the conflict, became one of Jason's closest friends. They spent afternoons sitting on the porch, talking about fishing, local history, and the changes the neighborhood had gone through. Jason noticed that the tone of community meetings had softened too. Instead of tense arguments and heated voices, people listened more. They asked questions and shared ideas. The new HOA president, Sharon, had made a point to encourage open conversations. She wanted everyone to feel included and heard, especially those who had felt ignored before. One afternoon, Jason received a surprise invitation to the next HOA meeting. Wasn't sure if he wanted to go. The past meetings had been difficult, but this time he felt ready. He decided to attend, hoping to help rebuild trust. When he arrived, the room was full of familiar faces. Some smiled warmly, others nodded politely. Sharon welcomed him with a kind handshake. The meeting started with discussions about improving the marina area, adding benches, planting flowers, and organizing community cleanup days. Jason raised his hand. "I'd like to help," he said simply. "I want to make this place better for everyone." People applauded softly. It was a small moment, but it felt huge in the weeks that followed. Jason worked with neighbors to paint the docks, clear out old debris, and plant new trees. Children helped too, learning about teamwork and caring for their environment. The marina began to feel alive again, a place of friendship and cooperation. One sunny Saturday, the community organized a big picnic by the lake. There was food, music, and games for all ages. Jason cooked burgers on the grill and laughed with neighbors he hadn't spoken to in months. As the sun set, people gathered around a bonfire, sharing stories and singing songs. Jason looked around at the smiling faces. He thought about how close the neighborhood had come to breaking apart and how much they had healed. The fence that had once divided them had turned into a bridge. But life wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, small misunderstandings, and moments of tension. People were human, after all. But now, there was respect, a willingness to listen and find common ground. Jason thought about Liberty, the boat that had started it all. It wasn't just a vessel for fishing or relaxing. It had become a symbol of standing up for oneself, fighting for fairness and of hope. One evening, Jason sat alone on the dock, the water calm beneath him. He felt a deep gratitude for his family's history, for the neighbors who had changed their minds, for the strength he found inside himself. The journey had been hard, full of frustration and fear, but it had led to something better. And as he watched the stars appear in the sky, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was ready. Ready to protect what mattered, ready to build community, and ready to face the future with courage. The marina was no longer just a place, 2 dock boats. It was a place where people came together, where voices were heard and respect ruled. Jason smiled quietly. He felt at home.